Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle back again. This time we're going to do a Penn 555. It's a graphite framed reel, one of my favorites. So a month or two or three ago now, I showed you one of the ones that I almost was a holy grail to me. I've had a dickens of a time finding one of these, but I did. It was a 525. It's the high-speed, small frame casting reel. And I found its big brother on Facebook Marketplace as part of a lot sale that we did on the Flea Market finds from 2.6. We're going to go in. We were told by the seller that he's got a problem with the anti-reverse dog. So I went ahead and I ordered the anti-reverse spring and the anti-reverse dog. Whether they're both needed or not, who knows, but it makes sense to change them both at the same time. So we're going to go ahead and do that replacement, but we're also going to show you how to take the reel apart, how to service it, how to oil and lube it, and how to put it back together. And in this case, we'll show you how to change out the anti-reverse drag as well. So let's get started. We'll do that by taking off the exterior, which is the handle and the star adjuster. And the handle is held on by a nut, which has a little cap that it's holding in place. And while we do that, a couple of things that I generally make a point of saying. One of them is that I wear a protective glove on my hand to keep the lubricants and oils and greases off of them as much as possible. And the other one is that I take pictures along the way, and those pictures can help you in a bind. So if you find yourself struggling, if you've forgotten the particular sequence of an assembly, any of those things, you can just go back to your pictures and look and see the orientation of a piece or a part, or what sequence you took them off in. Sometimes that's important, and I would encourage you to do that. Use a cell phone, use a digital camera, use something like this, a stationary video camera if you want, or the video function on your cell phone. Any of them are certainly perfectly fine, and they will help you along the way. And worst case, come watch my videos. Speaking of my videos, I would appreciate it if you like and subscribe and comment on these. That's kind of what helps my YouTube channel thrive, and how to help us make more of these videos along the way. So I've removed the nut, the handle. This looks out of place, but the reason it looks out of place is the circle is bigger than the shaft, so that seems to be out of place, but it might belong on a stack underneath. All right, we're going to remove the star adjuster then. And this is a high-speed reel, so it's bigger than the average bear, if you will. I do notice it's got a lot of junk and dirt and grease right there on the main bearing. You can just see that. So if that's an indication of what's on the inside, it may be why the anti-reverse is skipping. It can simply be that it's so overloaded with grease it's not moving, but that's okay. We have the replacement parts just in case. All right, speaking of case, we're going to take that side plate off. We're going to take our screwdriver to do that. And when you do this, I like to take the screws off, and I like to place them side by side, noting the length of the screws, because sometimes those screws are longer than others. And if you have a short or a longer screw, you want to know where it came from. And this is a good example here. The post screw is longer than the screw that it's up top that doesn't go into a post. And we'll assume we're going to see the same thing on this side. But we don't. So we have two shorts and a long. It's kind of odd. And then down below here, we'll see what we have here. My guess is somebody probably had this apart at some point and probably put the long ones that belong in the post. Yep. So we have two long ones that belong in the post, two short ones that belong in the other sides, but it's held the reel together, so we're fine with that. And then we have two screws on the bottom here holding these in as well. And those are pretty easy to identify as different. They're a smaller thread, and they're a narrower shaft. Once I make the mental notes of where these belonged, then I'll put them into my parts tray. I don't think we've introduced my parts tray yet, but my parts tray is simply the bottom of a milk jug. It is a great way to organize and keep your pieces and parts in one place, so that as you go to assemble the reel, you know where to find them. So we've taken the 6 screws out. That should be an indication that we can remove the side plate. And there you go, we can remove the side plate. Alrighty. We had the collar, which belongs under the bearing, fall off. And we have the side plate bearing here, which I'm going to push out because I want to make sure that not only is it cleaned, but that it's working well. The whole idea behind second chance tackle is to give your tackle a second chance, get it out there, go fishing, rather than just be put on the side because something's not working properly. In this case, the fellow told me he has a bad anti-reverse. That was part of the sale conditions. We knew that. And as a result of that, he's being upfront and honest with me. We've ordered the parts, and everything should go well. Okay, I've cleaned the bearing. I put a little bit of power lube on that thing just to free it up. If there was anything sticking in there, we'll go lube this up before we replace it. But that's the bearing for the assembly. The only other thing you would do on a side plate here, you want to make sure it's clean. I just see a little bit of grease or something over there, which we can take care of with a cotton swab. And we'll just put a little bit of oil on there. There's some grease behind there already. I'm going to just put some oil onto the eccentric. I'll just work it in to keep it going fresh. Okay, with that aside, there's a little bit more dirt in that one part where the spool will rest, so let's get that cleaned up while we're at it. And then we can put the side plate back in there. Here's the main deal behind this then. Big gear, that's why it's a high speed. Big gear driving small gear makes for higher speeds. This is our anti-reverse here. I don't know what, if anything, is wrong with it, but we'll go take care of that. And let's just dismantle this then. I'm going to take the two springs out that hold the yoke. I'm going to pull the main gear off. I'm going to take the collar and then the main gear assembly, and the yoke came out at that point, which is why I pulled the springs off, because they can shoot if I didn't take the springs off. And then we have this little jack that slides behind it, and we just have a bunch of old grease in here. So right now this anti-reverse dog looks like it's working, but because he told me it was a problem, and because I already went ahead and ordered the parts, we're going to replace that, and we'll show you how to do that as well. Okay, one more thing to replace, then just get this screw out of here for the anti-reverse dog. And this one actually kind of makes it nice. Most of the time it's on a post, and that post becomes a problem in trying to seat it. But in this case, you can set that whole anti-reverse dog up pretty easily. So I'm going to take the old one out and the spring. There's no sense fooling around with either. There's a little washer that goes underneath, so we'll get that right back onto the post. You are going to grab that cotton swab and just clean under that while we're at it. Let's do our little housekeeping here. And I'm going to grab that washer and put that right back on the Okay, let's clean up the pieces and parts that we have on the table. Then we'll go put that new jack and dog in. Dog and dog spring. I'm on the jack right now. So first up then is the replacement dog. Just going to put it next to it just to make sure. And there's wear. You can definitely see that there's wear on the tip, that's slanted right now, so that could cause a little bit of a misfooting. If you look at this one, it's square as opposed to the slant on it. And we will grab the spring, the replacement spring here. And the best way for me to do this has always been to put the spring onto that little hook before I install. And that's a spring. It's going to shoot, so please be careful when you do this. Okay, we have the screw, and we have the little washer that goes on top of the screw. And then we want to seat all of this. So that's going to seat over that copper stud. And we can grab the screw. And those of you that know me and little pieces and parts are probably preparing for an adventure right now, because I don't do very well with these. However, I got lucky there, so there you go. Got lucky. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. All right. And then what we want to do there is we want to take the tag end of that spring and just slip that over the post. And I'm going to use a little pick to do that. This is all about patience. That's one of the virtues you need in order to make this work. And we're good there. Okay, so now we have the drag stack. That's next up. So here's that big old ratchet. That's the one that the anti-reverse dog is going to sit in. It's an oblong, it's not a circle. So you want to push down on your anti-reverse. I have that screw a little too tight. Pull down on the anti-reverse, push down on the anti-reverse, either way. Then you need to seat it properly onto the main shaft, which has the oblong. And now we're seated properly. There's a little bit of dirt on there. I probably should have cleaned that off before I got so anxious to show you how to do that. But we'll just clean what little bit we have there. Then there's a hard washer that sits on top of that. Then we have the main gear. So you want to make sure that the main gear is clean of debris. This has got some stuff in it. So we're going to go ahead and just use a paper towel. There's nothing that's coagulated or anything that needs scraping. It just needs to be a clean surface. That's next up then. And we'll see if we can put that spool gear in right now. Sometimes you have to load the spool gear before the main gear, so if I get too carried away and start building up the drag stack only to find out that the spool gear needs to go in, then you have to remove it all. So the spool gear is clean. These are nice high quality pieces and parts. This is probably stainless. It's a nice thing. What I'm checking is to make sure all the teeth are fine and not impaired in any way, and they're not chipped or cracked, and that they're uniform on the side here, which is the case. Once I do that, I can grab some reel grease. I'm going to use some Penn Precision reel grease for this. Now, it just happens to be that this is a Penn reel, but I use the blue grease from them for pretty much everybody's reel. I would tell you, I get questions a lot about which lubricants to use, and I say as long as it's a fishing reel grease, then you should be fine. You don't need to use Penn grease on Penn and other manufacturers' grease on their products. You can use anybody's reel grease so long as the reel grease is meant for fishing reels. I'm going to grab the back of the jack here. The purpose of the jack, it's got some bump outs here. That's going to push the spool gear up. Just lays in the channel here. That's going to push the spool gear up and disengage it from the fork on the spool gear, enable it to work properly. Okay, that's the setup. Now we can put the main gear in. We're going to mesh that. I just noticed that I didn't do the teeth on the main gear, so I'm just going to put a little bit of grease on a couple of spots there. I did want to check the teeth while we're at it as well, and they look fine. And now we can go reinstall. So the way that these reinstall, this is a 6 drag setup. Fabric washers and metal washers and a cap washer up top. These are HT100 drags that get drag grease. I'm going to use Cal's Universal Drag Grease for that. I just dip it in, give it a nice little coating. I wipe it. I use my gloved hand to move it around, and then I use a paper cloth to wipe off the excess, and we can seat that in. You don't want to just glob it on. If you glob it on, it's just going to squeeze out, and it's going to, the idea of this is not necessarily as a lubricant, it's to keep the drag washers fresh and flexible. Alright, so we'll go back with this then. That's the second one. The middle one of the drag stack always has the eared or the keyed washer. That goes in next. Make sure that it's seated in those slots. If it's not seated in those slots, you're not going to be able to install this properly. Okay, back up with that. Last of the metals then. Cap washers next. And then I'm going to just pause the video here for a moment. I'll be right back. Okay, so I paused the video because I just wanted to take a quick check. I went and I pulled the schematic from mysticparts.com. I wanted to check that little washer that came out, and it came off the top of the Star Dragon. Indeed, that belongs there. So I wanted to make sure before we put it together that it didn't belong back here in that stack. So that's the cause of the pause. Now what we can do is we can put the collar on, and we can give this a turn to make sure that the dog that we assembled there is doing its job, because if you remember, that was the problem. And dog is operating just fine, thank you very much. Okay, next step then is to install the cap again. Now when you install the cap, you're going to need this stud to ride in this hole, and that's kind of an eyeball thing, but I like to set it up as high as I can, which is the reach of this, and then we can probably put this on here. I think either way it's going to be fine. And we did say we wanted to give it a good drink of oil before we put it back in, so let's go do that. I'm using a Real X oil, which is a synthetic fishing reel oil, and while I'm at it, I just have a little bit of junk on the side plate here, so let's get rid of that too. Okay. Okay, so next up then, we're going to take the spring. I'm going to load the spring onto the yoke. That's going to help balance this. And we're going to push that down. We're going to move the stud all the way down. And then we're going to try and load this up where we can mesh the stud with the hole in the jack. Okay, I just heard it snap, so we're in. You can tell because you got a nice fresh seam here. Put that ball bearing back in. I pulled that out. And now we can go ahead and put the screws in. The two screws that were long belong in those cross paths, crossbars. So let's go ahead and start with those. And this side is done. We'll go over to the other side, and we'll make sure that that's clean as well after we put the rest on this. We want to make sure we give this a test drive. And this is where that parts tray helps, because you have a lot of small pieces and parts, and those pieces and parts disappear, they fall on the floor, they do other things when you're not paying attention. So I always I've come to depend on this thing, and I recommend it to anybody who's doing real repair. Okay, we're going to put that small screw up top and a small screw in the bottom. That makes more sense. And that something like that doesn't bother me. Actually I like it because it says that in the 20 years of this reel, or whatever the age on it is, it's made in the USA, so it's been at least since prior to 2005, so we're at least 15 years into this reel. That it's been taken apart and serviced, and we saw for the most part, other than maybe some wear on this dog, that the reel is pretty substantial and clean, and just the way it should be. So, okay, we're going to go ahead and put that Star Drag on now. And again, I did check that that little washer does belong on the top here as a friction washer, or as a separator between the handle and the Star Drag assembly. So I'm okay with that. Now the handle goes on. There's two sides, one's for leverage, one's for less. I'm not a leverage person, so I'm going to drop that over to the side here and use the first one. I didn't pay attention, but this reel is not going back to a customer, so it really doesn't matter which one I set it in. Now if this was a customer's reel, I would go back to my pictures at this point and see which one it was set on, and make sure that I turned it to whatever setting they had it for. But in this case, I'm the customer, and I'm going to use the smaller throw. It's all a matter of preference. Now I'm taking my time here with this handle nut. I do not want to strip this nut. It's not going on square, so just take your time to set it up. Get it threaded properly. It's still not threading square. I just in a little trouble with that first bite for whatever reason. That's why I hand tighten all the time. I want to be careful with these. I think we got it this time. We're going to go grab that wrench, tighten it the rest of the way down. We do have it. And then we just want to find the flat side of that. That's generally where those caps line up. And the cap can go on. We're lined with the little hole for the set screw. I'm going to go ahead and put that on. And here's the beauty of these parts trays. I just looked in my parts tray as I was doing this, and I noticed that the two screws that belong in the bottom of this are still in my parts tray. So now you can go in and you can grab those and you can put them in the holes that they belong in and make that right. Alright, then we'll just go over to the other side. You have access to the spool from the other side. This has been built on a platform here that uses the back of the side plate here to mount all of the hardware, as opposed to having it mount on the gear side plate when you pull it out. We'll give this a turn. Oh, what a difference. Look at that. That's a pretty reel. Okay, let's just go over to this side then. We'll take this off. We'll clean up any debris that's on the spool. We'll just check. Now, those of you that know me also know that I prefer this type of a conventional reel versus a level wind feature. I'm not a fan of level winds. It just, to me, it's one more thing to break. I also like casting these reels, and this one's going to cast beautifully. But in casting those, a level wind tends to slow you down. There's more moving parts in there, which means that the reel will not be operating as efficiently as if it was just by itself. Alright, so the trim ring is off. Just checking to make sure there's any other pieces. Pull the side plate off. We've got two brakes on here for casting. Make sure that those brakes stay on there as you pull the spool. We're clean on this side, not a problem. I'm going to clean the spool shaft. And here's why I took that spool off. I wanted to get to the bearing underneath here. So we're going to go ahead and oil that bearing. Now if you needed to pull that bearing, there's a C-clip on here. You could do that. But this one's clearly spinning freely. And as I just was testing, we noticed that that was doing very fine. Thank you. So we can reinstall the spool. I'm going to check the back here for any kind of debris. This one looks pretty solid. I'm just going to clean off a little bit of the oil that remains, and I'm going to grab my oil and make sure that that backside bearing also gets its service. With that, we can just make sure that the brakes are up so that they ride inside of the ring here, and we can just put that right back on. So you pay attention when these came off. You notice that the pen was horizontal with the reel seat. Put the covers on. Now again, they had these kind of one short and one long in the cross posts, which don't make sense to me. I believe both of the long ones belong in the cross posts, so we're going to go put them back that way. And that essentially is the 555. It's the same beautiful reel with the ball bearings, the quality main gear and pinion gear. It's got the high-speed retrieve on it, just larger capacity. I'm going to use this one for bigger game fish, bluefish that fight and you want to jig with, striped bass where you want to live line perhaps, or cast plugs. I think this reel will do very well in the Northeast here, fishing for those species. So we'll give it a try. I keep some of the reels, not many, but I do keep some of the reels. Okay, we're in nice shape. I like that, that all around. We're going to go get that one now. This one's ready to go fishing. This is the graphite. It's a GS, I believe, is the coating, the GS 555. High-speed graphite frame, the larger version of the 525. And we're going to update our flea market finds, and I'll come back and I'll show you the other ones that we worked on from that 2.6 flea market deal. But I hope you've enjoyed the video. Again, as I asked on the front end of this, I would appreciate it if you can subscribe. That's what keeps my channel going. And thank you for watching. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.